finishes off the inbound. Redirects, Hines Allen, great entry feed.
The community center in Des Moines was alive with the buzz of children's laughter, the sound of sneakers squeaking against the polished wooden floor, and the rhythmic bounce of basketballs echoing like a drumbeat of pure youthful energy. And yet in the midst of all that familiar chaos, there came a moment of stillness, so profound that it seemed as though time itself had paused. A moment born not of drills or shooting demonstrations, but of the simple courage of an 8-year-old girl who asked a question no adult dared to voice aloud. And in that question, the true heart of America's most talked about athlete was revealed. For Caitlin Clark, fresh from seasons of both triumph and brutal criticism, stood center court at the Des Moines community basketball camp surrounded by 50 young players whose wide eyes and eager faces mirrored her own childhood, when she herself had sat cross-legged in gyms that smelled of leather basketballs and floor polish, watching older players with awe and silently promising herself that one day she would be the one holding the ball, the one teaching, the one showing what was possible if you never let go of your dreams. And at the front of the group sat Emma Rodriguez, small and serious, her hair tied neatly back and an oversized Iowa jersey, her brothers swallowing her small frame, her dark eyes fixed on Caitlin with that intense, unblinking attention children reserve only for heroes, absorbing every dribble, every word, every lesson about footwork, balance, and follow-through, until finally Caitlin invited questions and Emma's small hand shot up, her determination so clear that the chatter hushed instantly, as though everyone instinctively knew something important was about to happen. And when Caitlin smiled warmly and said, "Yes, sweetheart, what's your question?" Emma stood, her voice small but piercing in the quiet gym, and asked, "Miss Caitlin, why do people hate you?" "My mom says some people say mean things about you on the internet, but you seem really nice." And with that innocent question, the room froze, because in her child's clarity, Emma had articulated what countless others whispered privately, the paradox of an athlete who had brought joy to millions, yet endured relentless criticism, vitriol, and doubt. And though many adults in the room winced, unsure how Caitlin might respond, Caitlin herself felt her heart jolt, for here was the raw honesty of youth confronting her with the one question that had gnawed her in quiet moments, the question she herself had struggled to reconcile in sleepless nights scrolling through cruel comments. But instead of deflecting, instead of hiding behind platitudes, she made a choice that would not only define this exchange, but become a defining example of what it meant to be a role model, walking over to Emma and kneeling so they were eye level, her expression soft, her voice steady yet gentle, carrying across the hushed gym as she said, "Emma, that's a really important question, and I'm glad you asked it. The truth is, some people aren't going to like you, and that's just life. But here's what I've learned. When people say mean things about you, it usually says more about them than it does about you." And Emma's eyes widened as she listened, though she could not yet fully grasp that she was being gifted wisdom that most adults struggle their entire lives to internalize. And Caitlin, sensing the weight of the moment, leaned closer as though sharing a secret and added, "You know what I think? I think sometimes people get scared when they see others chasing their dreams and working really hard. It reminds them of dreams they gave up on, or things they wish they had the courage to try." And now even the parents and coaches leaned forward, caught in the gravity of the moment, recognizing that this was no longer a Q&A with a sports star, but something much larger. A masterclass in grace and resilience forged not in theory, but through Caitlin's lived experience of carrying the impossible burden of expectation, enduring criticism not for failure, but for daring to succeed in ways that made others uncomfortable. And as she gently placed a hand on Emma's small shoulder, she continued, "But here's the most important thing, Emma. You can't let other people's fear or anger change who you are. You have to keep being kind, keep working hard, and keep believing in yourself, even when it feels like the whole world is watching and waiting for you to fail." And though Caitlin's voice was calm, each word carried the resonance of someone who had fought battles invisible to most, the lonely nights questioning her worth, the weight of strangers' opinions pressing in on her joy for the game she loved. And Emma, with childlike simplicity, nodded slowly, but what she could not yet know was that This exchange would ripple outward, carried by the parents who filmed it, the coaches who retold it, and the children who absorbed it, becoming a seed of courage planted in countless families, sparking conversations about kindness, resilience, and the importance of loving oneself in a world too quick to tear down. And Caitlin, standing again, looked at the group of young players and added, "Every one of you will face times when people doubt you or say unkind things, but those voices don't get to decide your story. You do." And for a moment the gym fell into reverent silence before erupting into applause, the children clapping because their hero had spoken, the adults clapping because they had just witnessed a kind of leadership that transcended sport. And later that night, when Emma went home, she told her parents not only about the drills and the autographs, but about how Caitlin had answered her question, and her parents, moved to tears, realized their daughter had been given not just a role model in basketball, but a guide for navigating life's inevitable cruelties. And in the weeks to come, videos of the exchange spread across social media, turning what had begun as an innocent question into a cultural moment, one that reminded people that resilience is not about ignoring pain, but about refusing to let it corrupt your heart. And Caitlin herself would reflect privately that Emma's courage to ask, and her own decision to answer with honesty rather than evasion, had reminded her of something essential, that the true purpose of her platform was not simply to score points or break records, but to model authenticity, kindness, and grace under fire, to show young girls like Emma that strength is not the absence of vulnerability, but the choice to stay true to yourself despite it. And in the seasons that followed, whenever the criticism grew loud, whenever doubt crept in, Caitlin found herself thinking back to that humid July afternoon, to the wide eyes of a child who asked the hardest question with the purest heart. And she remembered the promise she had made not only to Emma but to herself, to keep being kind, to keep working hard, to keep believing. And in that way, a single conversation in a small community center became a touchstone, not just for one little girl, but for an entire generation, learning from Caitlin Clark what it truly means to live with courage, resilience, and
Again, her third of the ball game.
They're able to get a quality look right here.
Beckers. They give Paige some room.
The gymnasium in Des Moines had grown hushed after Emma's brave little question. But what followed would etch itself into memory far beyond that humid summer afternoon, for in the innocence of an 8-year-old child there emerged a mirror that revealed the most human side of Caitlin Clark. A young woman carrying the weight of expectation, scrutiny, and national attention, and yet determined to remain true to herself. When Emma's eyes filled with tears, not the tears of pain but of understanding, it was as if the child recognized instinctively that she had been entrusted with wisdom that many grown adults struggle for a lifetime to comprehend. And when she asked softly, "But doesn't it hurt your feelings?" the vulnerability of her voice pierced the silence in a way no carefully constructed question ever could, opening the door for Caitlin to share a truth rarely admitted by public figures. She did not hide behind bravado nor construct an armor of cliches. Instead, she said with unflinching honesty, "Of course it hurts sometimes. I'm human, just like you." Her voice thick with emotion, and in that confession, a ripple spread through the gym. For here was someone adored for her strength and talent, yet courageous enough to admit fragility, to allow children and adults alike to see that strength and sensitivity are not opposites but companions. She went on, gently explaining that when the sting of cruel words weighed on her, she reminded herself of girls like Emma who were watching and learning, and how her responsibility was not to appear invulnerable, but to show that it was possible to be successful and still kind, possible to be strong and still tender, possible to face malice and yet continue to choose goodness. And in that moment, Emma's little world shifted, for she realized that role models are not defined by trophies, but by the choices they make when no one would blame them for growing bitter, and the adults watching recognized too that sometimes the most powerful lessons about character do not come from books, lectures, or motivational slogans, but from conversations where people are brave enough to be utterly human together. The dialogue did not end there, for Emma's courage in asking opened the floodgates for other children, and soon questions filled the air about bullies on the playground, disappointments after missed shots, and the pressure of being yourself when others try to mold you into something else. And Caitlin, with patience rare for someone constantly pulled in countless directions, answered each query with the same gentleness she had shown Emma, weaving her own experiences of doubt, of nights spent, scrolling through cruel comments, of moments when walking away felt easier than enduring yet another round of criticism, and turning them into lessons of resilience, reminding them that sport, like life, is not measured by perfection but by persistence, and that kindness is not weakness, but the most enduring strength. The parents, coaches, and community leaders in the room could not have foreseen how those minutes would echo in homes across Iowa and beyond, yet many would go home that evening and sit down with their children to talk not just about basketball drills but about resilience, empathy, and the courage to support others instead of tearing them down. And in those living rooms, new seeds were planted, seeds that might one day grow into kinder classrooms, gentler locker rooms, and more compassionate workplaces. When the camp drew to a close, Emma, her small voice steadier now, said words that broke the last barrier between idol and child. "Miss Caitlin, I want to be like you when I grow up, not just at basketball, but at being nice to people even when they're not nice to me." And Caitlin, overcome by the rawness of the moment, felt her own eyes blur. For here was proof that the legacy she was building stretched far beyond three-point records and sellout arenas. She hugged the girl softly, whispering, "Emma, you're already like me in the most important way. You have a kind heart, and you're not afraid to ask important questions, and that will take you further than any basketball skill ever could." And though the gym eventually emptied, the true game had only just begun, for unknown to everyone present, the encounter would not only travel across the digital world as clips went viral and hashtags spread, but would also ignite tangible change. In the weeks that followed, schools across the Midwest began showing the video as part of anti-bullying initiatives. Youth leagues added lessons in sportsmanship and resilience alongside shooting drills, and families spoke more openly about the difference between reacting in anger and responding with grace, creating a cultural ripple effect grounded in the wisdom of a single child's query and the honesty of an athlete who refused to pretend she was made of stone. 3 months later, proof of the encounter's lasting influence came in the form of a carefully written letter, each word drawn in the neat but uneven handwriting of an 8-year-old determined to express gratitude, where Emma told